This next session is dual use and defence. So it's about a part of the market that's moved from the margins to the mainstream remarkably quickly. So on the one side, you've got founders building technologies with civilian and defence applications. And on the other, you've got investors and governments trying to reconcile national security priorities with traditional venture timeframes and sensitivities. So I guess the simple question, maybe not so simple, is where in this space are there genuinely venture-backable opportunities, and where should the capital arguably come from a completely different pool altogether? So I'm hoping some of the things we'll explore today are how dual-use companies are being assessed today, how procurement ethics and export controls bite in practice, and what it really means for a portfolio when a business has the MOD or NATO in its customer pipeline rather than other SaaS scale-ups. So Tanya.
Thank you very much. And the first thing is that is not a simple question, or if it is, at least the answer is far from simple. But good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this panel. We really do have a wealth of experience across multiple sides of the dual-use investment ecosystem here. So I'm really looking forward to having the conversation with you, and hopefully you'll enjoy it too. Just a quick word about me. I'm Tanya Suarez. I'm the CEO and founder of IoT Tribe. We've set up something called Janus Allies for the MOD, and we're delivering the NATO Diana Accelerator and many other things to really boost the UK's defence tech ecosystem. So it's a privilege, as I said, to have the panel in front of me today. So I'm going to start with Amelia. Amelia Armour is a partner in the early stage fund at Amadeus Capital Partners, where she's been backing deep tech startups since 2009. You don't look at Amelia. She leads investments at the seed stage, focusing on AI, photonics, quantum, and novel materials. William McManners, venture capital investor, former Special Forces officer, so don't get on the wrong side of him, and managing partner of MD1 Ventures, Europe's first national security VC. And he's also previously been a security sector co-founder. Tim Ketton-Locke leads the Ministry of Defence's Office for Small Business Growth, driving 7.5 billion pounds in SME engagement, so definitely the man to mob after the panel. And he also brings a track record of delivering large-scale digital and operational transformation across national security and health. And finally, Paul Livingston, CEO of Lockheed Martin UK. He's got more than 30 years of experience working in aerospace and defence. He started us actually as an apprentice, and he's particularly passionate, therefore, about seeking out young talent and encouraging greater youth participation in space and aerospace and defence generally. He was previously a governing board of Women in Defence. He is currently representing the US industry in the UK's Defence Industry Joint Council. And my favourite bit, he has been a crew member at McDonald's.
Best management training ever had.
Absolutely. A starter for 10, I mean, you know, the peace dividend, for those of us who were around at the time where the coin was being broadly sprinkled around the press and society, it's clearly over. But we're now, sorry. Before that, we've seen a shift from defence being something that was nasty to be put on the corner, a sector that was essentially being populated and run by people that had nefarious interests, to something in which it's really seen not just from a VC perspective but also from a society perspective, a real interest and people understanding that actually this is mission-led. According to Deal Room, we've seen funding hit 10.9 billion in 2025, and that figure's actually surged in Q1 of 2026 to 8.6 billion. So coming back to my original question, given that we've now seen that peace dividend, it's over, do you think that these figures are a sign of over-exuberance, or are they a real signal that defence tech is now an essential asset class for any portfolio? And could we start with you, please, Paul?
Thanks. So I think what we're seeing is bigger than a short-term reaction to headlines or a temporary investment cycle. And whilst it's difficult to predict exactly what the geopolitical environment looks like in 2, 4, 5 years, or maybe I mean weeks, or maybe I mean days, A structural shift, I think, has really begun. There's definitely a rebalancing around security, industrial resilience, sovereign capability is a really big thing, and technological advantage, and the exploitation of AI, autonomy, and advanced manufacturing, and it's increasingly seen where those come across commercial and defence markets. So capital's flowing into the sector, talent's definitely flowing into the sector. And we've invested in more than 60 companies through our own VC arm, which we're just expanding massively as well. So I do think it is a genuine change that will be with us for decades to come.
Amelia.
Yeah, certainly we never talked about defence investing a few years ago, and so that's been a significant shift. We've always done dual-use investing, so we are an NSIF fund, so supported by the National Security Strategic Investment Fund, and so they pull a lot of our companies through into different projects that they will be running. We've sort of stuck to our knitting in terms of, we are interested in the underlying technology. That's what drives our investments rather than defence as a particular asset class, because at the end of the day, we've got to come back to the fundamentals of investment. But certainly the number of companies that we're seeing on the computer vision side, on the robotics side, that's really changing and having dual use applications alongside numerous sort of communications companies and sort of merging into space tech as well along the same line.
So the key thing is the technology, and the fact that it's defence is maybe it's of interest and it's a given. It's a market, but is one of many markets. Will.
I would suggest that absolutely, and for the fact that we're having the conversation here today, the fact it's so well attended, to those who've come, and also the fact there's genuine curiosity, both from operators in other sectors saying, could I do something in this space, to large primes engaging with the SME community in a meaningful way, and also to policymakers who are either driven to or are compelled to, by circumstance, take this sector in the manner that the market has been taking it. I just suggest two things. Firstly, capital inflows don't necessarily mean sector growth, so it's important to understand where revenue is coming from, and what style of revenue, or what nature of revenue that means. Is it emergency spending? Is it core program spending? So that's something I think it's important for everyone to be aware of. And the second thing is that defence is obviously the most obvious way, but national security and national interest it's a team game. It's a cross-government game. There are multiple different departments that have to collaborate together to deliver the national outcomes that defence is a lever of. So when founders, when operators, when investors are looking at the sector, I suggest it's important to make sure you think, what national security outcome is this targeted towards? What national security value can I bring? And defence, and say the Home Office, the Foreign Office, Treasury, all of these departments may have an interest in the product or service that's on offer.
So it's also about resilience, and I guess that old adage that even when you're at peace, you're actually preparing for war. Tim.
I think we've seen two big changes in the sector. One, defence is seen as more investable than it ever has been, and we're seeing that from banking and the VC community wanting to come in. And there's a need for stability, and I think what we've seen, particularly from the Middle East, is how instability causes volatility in the market, and therefore it's not invest in defence because we can be an aggressor, but invest in defence because it can give you that stability. The second thing we've seen is that dual use that was spoken about in technology, and huge shift is particularly from the Formula One. We're probably the pioneers in that area where technology could be used in one sector, but actually, if you're using it in a high demanding, frequently needed in terms of feedback, actually it's a natural fit into where defence works. So those two grow areas.
And we've seen that with Kraken, haven't we? Who for many years were operating with high speed boats, and now of course they're moving in maritime. Paul, so coming back to you, you've been in the sector for over 37 years. That's amazing. How has the defence technology landscape shifted, and what has that meant practically for Lockheed Martin's strategy?
I was a child prodigy. Could I just say that I started when I was 4? So obviously, everyone always talks at these things, don't they, about how quickly the pace of technology is changing. I would say that we have, over decades continued to invest early in lots of technologies. And in fact, we have a chief engineer who deals with, if you like, our day-to-day programs. We have a chief technology officer, and she looks out from years kind of 3 to 30. So we've always got an eye on what is changing, I guess. I think what has fundamentally changed for me is the way we engage with innovation and technology. So if I was to go back kind of 20-odd years, 25 years to when I started at Lockheed Martin, we would see a really cool company with some really good technology, and we'd buy them. And then they'd die because we'd crushed them with corporate process and they couldn't afford the flow downs and all the rest of it. So what we do now is we have become really good, I think, at the husbandry of small and medium-sized enterprises, either through engaging with them in direct contracts or through investing in them. And I mentioned earlier, in the UK alone, we've invested in Cloud NC, Q5D, SatView. I think I mentioned earlier, but we're taking our 400 million VC fund and we're increasing it to $1 billion. And those will all go into relatively small investments in technology where we think there are places to go. What I would also say is, though, we also invest in at the big end of the supply chain here, and that rattles down through. So I think our spending on the F-35 program here equates to about 24,000 jobs a year in the UK economy that go on for decades and decades. And finally, I mean, Tim's office is a really good initiative from the MOD. We set up something about 3 years ago called SME Unite, which is a way for, effectively makes it much easier for small and medium-sized enterprises to come and contract with us without all of the difficulty. We know that when you ask Lockheed Martin to bid a contract, we go off and we have a marching army of people who write a bid. For SMEs, it's what they're doing in their evenings while they're watching EastEnders or Landman, if you're me, or whatever it is. The other thing I think big industry needs to do to help engage technology is just pay your bills on time. If you're an SME, we pay you in 7 days. So forget the government's prompt payment code, and I think there's more to be done from the MOD and government generally about forcing the big primes to make sure those kind of things are flowed all the way down through the tiers of their supply chains.
Thank you. And taking you up on the, crushing SMEs until the lifeblood is sucked out of them, let's move on to the defence as a single customer market. Well, is it a single customer market? Do startups need to find other markets because they just won't survive? Not just the time frames, the procurement mechanisms, but also the fact that some programs just, you might just have missed something in which your technology was going to really fit. What are the pros and cons of that?
I mean, it's quite a question, but taken from the perspective of a founder who has a product or a service. So we always like to try and work out how have they come about their position. Are they an operator in the space before? Are their technologists pivoting from something else? An academic who's had a component idea that wishes to bring it to market. So there's two aspects. If it's a founder that's exploring a conceptual idea or an academic idea, and is looking to find a market for it, defense is a market. But the reality is it's what is the best user and what's the pull, what's the demand signal for their product or service idea. So the first thing is there is nothing wrong with somebody coming up with an idea that might solely have a defense application. So that's one aspect to the question. But then the second is the manner in which they take that product or service to market. So they might be a direct prime, what we call a prime, which is someone who's contracting directly with the government, just like Lockheed Martin. But there are plenty of opportunities now, and particularly with new initiatives, which is nice to see in this market, new initiatives for SMEs to become primes, to win direct award contracts with the government. So in some circumstances, where appropriate, they will have that opportunity. And yes, they will need to focus their business and their product on delivering against that requirement. But there are plenty of other circumstances where they can form a component part of a wider program as part of a consortium. They can work with businesses such as Lockheed Martin. They can they can put together teams for particular programs and then see where that program goes. So the first aspect is it a defense product? Sometimes, yes. If so, that's great. The second is how are they going to take their product to market? And I've always thought, and we certainly are of the view, that where a business can collaborate well with the ecosystem as it is, and not try and fight the ecosystem. For example, complaining about procurement timelines. We all complain about procurement timelines. This is just like it's almost a sort of a joke topic now. But that's not the procurement problem. That's just reality. So we try and encourage our funders, we try and encourage market participants to be objective about the situation they're in and work out how they can best deliver what they can do. And we often find collaboration actually is probably the most productive way forward.
But to your point on procurement, I think that there is a recognition that the system does need to be fixed. It's perhaps a little bit outdated to the pace of technology and how quickly new capabilities need to be brought in to serve defence.
Yes, again, time and a place. So I would suggest there are very good reasons why lengthy procurement processes are in place for certain things. Think healthcare device, think nuclear programs. So genuinely, it's a time and a place discussion. However, we have seen, I don't mean to be too positive, but we have seen some good new initiatives coming through, both with primes being given the space and the flexibility to work with SMEs, sometimes offered, sometimes compelled. All of these things are productive. And at the same time, government opening up new opportunities for these quicker procurement timelines. So time and a place.
I don't know if you've seen it, but certainly through the NSIF relationship, this speed is much quicker because they will fund the first year of a project. And so then you can get deployment and pull through much faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amelia, bring you then on that point. How have you seen your own approach to investing evolve? Because as you are an NSIF fund now, but when you set out, your LPs may have set out some conditions that in today's climate would not necessarily be the same.
Yeah, it's a good question. We have the British Business Bank as one of our major investors, and one of our LP, one of their requirements, which is across our documents, is that we can't invest in offensive technology, which we interpret as things that go bang. We'll not be investing there, and I think that is unlikely to change. I think that will stay there. I think in terms of how we look at investments, though, in any market, including if it's a defence or a dual-use technology, they're exactly the same. So, is it great tech? Is it an amazing team? And then coming to the market and the exits. And so the market and the exit, especially for just a defence orientated company, is really interesting. If you're a UK company, is that going to be easy or difficult to sell outside to other geographies? Really, how big is your market? Will the US adopt your technology if it's not US homegrown? Because from a venture perspective, we want to be aiming to build companies that, are getting to the size of $1 billion. You can't do that in the UK, so you've got to go outside of the UK. So then things start to fall down just following our normal investment thinking. And then in terms of an exit, how many acquirers are there in the space? There are the primes, there are neo-primes, but really, how large is that market? And are there restrictions that the UK government are going to put on selling this company to another geography-located, headquartered company? So all of those things means that when you're looking through the lens of just a defence-orientated company, it makes it harder to reach to a conclusion that you can really build a big company in the space.
Thanks. And Paul, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? You were also saying that for Lockheed Martin, it's important that the companies, the startups you're working with, don't have a market that is just going to be local, as in the UK or Finland or wherever. You actually do need them to have that grander ambition and that ability to serve other geographies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we would always look at tech that can flow in and flow across our products and services that the UK defence budget, despite the fact it will grow eventually in the next parliament, whenever that rise comes, it's not going to be big enough to really sustain the kind of growth that a VC, particularly if you're talking about VC funding, would want to see that grow to. So, but the global defence market is growing, and also, we're investing a huge amount in space. We've just opened a space technology centre up in Newcastle, which we've cut. Well, it's not opened yet, so we topped out the building. But it's us it's the UK government and Northumbria University co-investing in this set of labs and testing facilities that will enable SMEs to come in and develop technology in the space domain. And space is an area where there's absolutely such crossover between the commercial application and the defence application. So I think if you're in a company and you're looking at the defence market, think about what is your actual real market area looking like. I think the other thing is come and talk to the primes and other organisations, and some of the trade bodies like ADS and Make UK can all help you understand what kind of steps you might need to go through if that's the markets you want to interact with.
So Tim, over to you now. So you've got a hard target. You've got to increase direct and indirect spend with SMEs by 2.5 billion to reach that 7.5 billion by 2028. That's around the corner. So what are you doing differently to actually achieve this?
It is a big target. So it's set in March 2025. I arrived in November, so we've already used a year up. There's two things we're aiming at. So one is increasing spend, and that's internal and external targets. So if you look, so direct spend, as people have pointed out, is that prime relationship between defence and the supplier, and then indirect is through the supply chain, so tier 1, 2, 3, etc. And we're setting internal targets to make sure that we increase the spend. So defence is now in portfolios, so those 14 portfolios that we've got, setting them targets and saying, let's increase. And a culture of think SME first, so lower value contracts to start with, and then have an aspiration to try and push them into the higher value. And then working down the actual strategic partners and saying, well, how do we help you to think that SME first culture? So I'd be working with people like Paul and saying, how do we help you do that? And the other side is removing the frictions. So we did a lot of work between March and November between understanding the frictions that SMEs face. So security clearance, defence is hard to navigate, can't get availability test evaluation. Removing those frictions and the concept to contract idea, make it as frictionless as possible. So the team's sort of split into those two areas, and over the next 2 years, we're chipping away and making those differences. We've already hopefully delivered a website that was done in 50 days, 50 working days, and we've already looking to complete the first 4 things, so 2 off that list in the next, by the end of this month. So we are making progress, but slow progress.
Great to hear. Amelia and Will, let's move now to liquidity and capital. So firstly, and there was a question on the space panel that was very similar to this, what does the exit environment look like for defence tech specifically? I mean, dual use is slightly different, but let's look at defence tech. And secondly, given that VC money is not the only route for getting capital and meeting your capital requirements, what other options are on the table, and how should founders be considering those according to the stage they are?
After you.
I think it's an interesting environment right at the moment for exits because some of the neo-primes are very well funded and are really active in the market doing M&A. So I think as at today, I think that's quite positive. I still come back to my original comment of I think it's a limited market, and so you just need to think really carefully about that. I think the capital point is interesting. It sort of slightly feeds on from Paul in that VC funding may not be the right capital to fund all of this, and so if you look at some of the technology that has come out of wartime situations, you look at radar, super glue, other things, they haven't been VC funded. They'll have come from government-backed labs. And so, in a wartime situation where you get this fast innovation, it's probably from other areas that you're going to get the funding and also the innovation coming through, which then eventually then filters into the larger, more enterprise or commercial market, a bit like, radar moving on to then microwaves and things like that, which is then probably where we would then get more involved.
Will.
And it's important to also understand what the company's trying to do with money. So we've had exit environments. Well, we've had an exit very recently, which is a listing. So a straight defense company that produces defense products for the defense market with a bit of diversification has listed in America. So that's fantastic. That's a good example. But that's just one particular outcome. The way that defense contracts are structured, without putting everyone to sleep, is you purchase a solution, you purchase a product, you purchase a tool, then you have to maintain that tool, you have to deliver it, you have to train the tool. So there's actually a lot of opportunity for a business as opposed to a product to gain funding in different ways. So for example, all of us are quite often naturally so focused on the product sale, and we think, right, well, we've got to get venture capital money to build the product and sell the product. But actually, if that product's going to really have a life, if your business is going to really have a life, you have to make sure that you've come up with a solution to deliver that product time and time again in multiple years, to have it renewed, to have it trained, to have it developed, to have parts manufactured, etc. So this is where you get interesting scenarios. What we've seen recently is an increase in interest from lenders. So it started with private credit lenders and some venture debt allocators, then going into businesses providing invoice discounting, factoring, those sort of things. So actually, we like to see, and we have seen an increase, which is great, of those with different sorts of capital actively coming to the market. And of course, if someone's willing to lend to you, that means your cash flows are creditworthy. And if your cash flows are creditworthy, that tells you that there's something fundamentally changing within capital markets as relates to SMEs in this quite niche sector.
Yeah, can I just to add to that? I mean, there's this kind of myth that the big banks, don't like defence, and it wasn't a myth a little while ago, but it's increasingly becoming more of a myth now. And you look at some of the major banks, and I'm not on commission for anyone, but like I know NatWest, for example, have set up 400 regional advisors for defence across the country. That they are actively seeking to do that. And it comes to your point, Amelia, about VC isn't always the right solution. Maybe it's just a working capital bridge or something like that. So I think that if you are in that kind of start-up, scale-up phase, don't immediately think, well, the big banks won't be interested in me because of ESG rules, because that's just not true anymore.
Actually, we still hear from startups, particularly when they're doing something offensive, that they have problems setting up bank accounts. So
I think they just need to talk to the right people. Quite often you walk in even at the branch level and they won't know, but if you find out, nearly all the big banks, Santander, DB, Credit Agricole, they've all got specialist defence sectors now to set up and deal with defence companies. So I think you just have to penetrate it at the right point. Use Claude, he's very useful for those things.
Yeah. We'll let them know. Okay, so I think that we're nearing the end of the panel. So what I would like is one piece of advice for deaf tech startups trying to raise, and one for newbie investors from you, Will, and then from you, Amelia. So first of all, can we go with the deaf tech startups trying to raise?
Make sure you have an incredibly clear view of what your user will do with your product, how your user's life will be made fundamentally easier, and just focus on that at the beginning.
Amelia?
Yeah, have a think about the market sizing. And then also I think one of the other things is to really think about your team and make sure your team are on board with what the products are going to do, because you see some dual-use companies which move into the defense sector and the team become really uncomfortable with the way the tech is being used. And so getting the team to come along with you is important.
And newbie defense investors?
They're just businesses. It's a business like any other. It's a product market like any other. Team dynamics exactly is the point, but the key thing is just forget the word defense. You've got to make a good investment into a good team with a good market.
Amelia?
Yeah, don't be a sheep. Just, apply your normal investment rules and don't get distracted.
Brilliant. And Tim and Paul, one piece of advice for those that are new to working with defence. You first, Tim.
It would be amiss of me not to say contact the office and use us. We've got the Shape service to help people do that. I'd advocate what Paul said earlier about banking. Please come and speak to us. We've got some very good contacts in that sector who could help as well.
I think find someone who can sit, if you're really genuinely not done defence before, Find someone who can sit on your board or as an advisor or something who's got a defence background. Because to be honest, the language of defence, it has its entire lexicon, mainly in 3-letter acronyms. And people just, I mean, you know, we spend the first 6 months of a new graduate or one of our apprentices just teaching them the language of defence. So I think if you're genuinely not aware, but you've got a tech piece that really you think really would apply, find someone who can literally be your babel fish into defence would be my advice.
Perfect, thanks. And exactly, we've got a little bit of time for a few questions from any of you, so do make the most of this opportunity.
So my name is Elaine. I'm the founder of Augment Aero. So we're developing spatial computing technology for EasyJet and British Airways at the moment. But we've had a lot of interest from the defence market. Me personally, very commercial aerospace, and that's always been my bag. But obviously, defence is absolutely enormous. What would your advice to, obviously, apart from get myself a babblefish, in defence, what other advice could you have for someone like myself that's kind of tickling the defence market?
I think try and talk to the customer community a bit. What I will tell you is the MOD has gone through, in the last year, the most fundamental reorganisation it's ever had through a thing called defence reform. And what they're trying to do, and they're breaking the habits of a lifetime, Tim, so it's taking some time, is to stop specifying product and start talking about specifying their problem, right? And so if you can get them to articulate the problem that you think you have a solution for, then you can start talking to what's called the National Armaments Directorate Group, because basically the idea is the military, called the Military Strategic Headquarters, come up with a problem statement, and then the NAD group have to go and find a solution to that. So it's really about understanding what problem you think you can solve for your end customer and getting them to articulate that into the procurement system.
And given that this is a VC event, could you see a VC being interested at this stage, or would you wait until we've got a bit more traction?
Or I'd have to come and talk to you about what it really is you do before I could qualify to answer that question. Or ask Amelia, she's the VC.
Gentleman at the back there.
Hi, Dominic Keane from Brettbots. I run a venture capital portfolio that has kind of by accident rather than design become quite heavy in dual-use technologies. I'd be interested just to hear from you all whether you think it's actually the defence route that is going to be the best source of exits over the next 3 or 4 years, or actually whether the kind of general dual-use, more kind of civilian-use messages could be more attractive to buyers.
Good Lord. I'd say it depends on the sector that the particular business is functioning in. For example, you could have a founder that is a health tech founder that's had material traction, both regulatory and capital, from national security. I mean, look at COVID. There you go. And that then could find itself with a home in pharma, for example. So I know it sounds like a bit of a non-answer to the question, but our view is that the company should be able to, and we should encourage the company to take its route and be open and flexible with its perspective on where it could take its journey. Because the reality is capital markets change, and if a company's been able to build its product, build its service, and build its traction in one particular sector, then the market will decide where it's going to best find its ultimate home.
Yeah, one of the things I worry about in the defence sort of sector investing is what happens if government contracts stop, if that's your main source of revenue. You know, if the war in Ukraine stops tomorrow, what happens to the defence budget in the UK? Does it get reallocated into healthcare or into education? And I think if you sit in Finland or Poland, you are looking through a completely different lens than if you're sitting in the UK. And so the way that the defence budgets get spent and that money gets changed as soon as that war ends will be super interesting, because everyone is acting under scarce resources, and I think in the UK we will reallocate elsewhere. So if you have companies that are purely dependent on government contracts, I think that's risky.
It was mentioned a little bit about supply chains, but I'd love to know a bit more how you're viewing that. Obviously, defence is only as good as the raw materials and things that can continue to go into it. So I'd love some comments about flows and how you're seeing that part of the market.
I think that's for you, Paul.
We're very good, other than one or two notable and well-mediated exceptions, at understanding where our supply chain goes, and we spend a lot of money doing our supply chain illumination. And one of the interesting things is when governments come to us and go, can you increase your capacity, double your capacity for this, triple your capacity for that? That's all great, but we're an integrator, right? 65, 68% of what we receive in revenue, we spend in our supply chain. So actually, you're absolutely right. We have to be very cognizant of where that is and making investments in. But that also comes back to, if you are an integrator, the husbandry of your supply chain, even down to the SME, tier 5, tier 6 down level, we're really focused on, because that's the only way we can give assured security of supply and resilience back into our customers.
And that security goes into the cap table as well. So it's also something to remember. Thank you very much indeed, Will, Tim, Amelia and Paul.